With Richard Martin. He sent me a little link to some rules he has of modern life, and I'd like to discuss them. He started this little conversation with me after he and I were pinging back and forth on one of my Panzer Corps broadcasts, and I thought, man, that's some deep stuff. Let's get dissecting that together. We only pinged back and forth about the first three rules, but as you can see, he has 8 listed here, and we'll try to get through at least the first 2, if not 3. I ended up discussing the third one with my wife, so I'm looking forward to this discussion. Let's start with rule number 1. No one is obligated to like you. Expand on this, Richard.
I think something has happened in modern time. People are trying to get validation for who they are as a person from other people, and they want the validation given and not earned. I think it's another way of phrasing it. Is your existence doesn't require that somebody likes you as a person, if that makes sense. Like, just because you're breathing oxygen and walking around interacting with the physical world doesn't mean other people around you have to care about you, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Or maybe not care about you, but like you. But I think something's happened where people now believe that their mere existence means that people should like you. And I don't understand it.
You don't understand why people would necessarily like. I'm sorry. So
I don't understand why people. I don't understand why people seem to think that they should just be liked for existing.
like you're.
You see this. You see this play out on college campuses.
Okay. Explanation.
So it's just, people, even in my time, which is maybe 15 years ago when I went to college, people would be offended if you were not paying attention to them. And we're not even talking like you're working on a group project. I'm just talking like in a public space. I think the problem is much, much worse in like the last decade. Like in my time, it was okay. People, you were allowed to kind of ignore people and proceed to go on and do your own thing. But I think there's something that's happening on modern campuses where just you should be paying attention to me. Whatever you're doing, like you should stop what you're doing, and whatever I want to talk about, you should be obligated to pay attention to. It kind of ties into the rule 2.
Okay. Before we
there's
move
too
on
much
to
of
that, let's stick a little bit with this, because I find it a little contrasting with the reality of the way people operate on a whole in this society, where they're constantly saying to the other person across from them that you don't matter to me. I'd rather see what's on my phone. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, that's another phenomena. You could easily add that.
But I mean, but you see what I'm saying? It's no one is obligated to like you. Well, everybody is acting as if like everybody else that is around me is not worth my time because I'd rather see what's on my phone.
That ties into points I bring up later, actually, in this document. This is not an accident. The observation that you have made there, nothing that's happening socially in the world, it's a global phenomena. It's not an accident.
Okay, but where I'd like to stick on this is the idea that I think the idea that people need to like me, this validation of me and my thought process, I think keeps us from actually expressing our true thoughts and emotions. And that's where I thought you were going with that rule number 1, is that this limits the willingness to open up to others, because I'm afraid that if I actually tell people what I really think and feel, then they won't like me. Is that what you also meant by rule number one?
Yeah. I think this rule could be expanded to many implications. But I think you actually explained it probably a little bit better. I think I was taking a very literal interpretation there, but there's this other subtext to it that sometimes, like when I was younger, said a lot of rash things. I said a lot of inappropriate things.
Mm.
But I was never offended if someone didn't want to hang out with me. If I said these things and you were just like, holy crap, I don't want to be around this person. I kind of accepted that was the consequence. But what's kind of cool about that, though, is when people are more expressive, you know where they stand. So I find it really difficult to navigate modern society because you don't know where people stand, because there's fear that if you say something that has any controversial component to it, that means someone won't like you.
Even if you just drop a
And
name. I've dropped names
that's
before
right.
that tend to trigger people. They have an immediate visceral
Yes.
reaction to a name that
It's insane.
I find shocking. As if that
It
person
doesn't.
is a pariah in and of themselves. So to posit an idea from that person is anathema. For example, I mentioned just Peterson. Jordan, isn't it Jordan Peterson?
Jordan Peterson, yes.
Yeah, I mentioned
That's right.
him. I read his 12 Rules for Life, I think, and that's what reminded me of these rules that you had. Is that one of the key aspects in that book was the idea that listening to someone else as if they have something that you are unaware, like they have something you've never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that idea I find fascinating and helps me in my conversations with other people listen, not just be ready with a response. That's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I knew that you'd be bringing things. When you started dropping these rules on that broadcast of mine, I was like, oh, this is good stuff. This is good conversation starter type stuff. And so I'm glad that we're going through that.
You know what's crazy? This is controversial.
Having a conversation is controversial, which is insane.
But this is not an accident that we've gotten to this point. I just think, look, if you're a fat kid in school, you probably had some people didn't hang out with them, and there's problems with that. But just because you have a disability or you have some other issue, it doesn't mean that people are obligated to spend time with you and think you're an amazing person.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
I
that
don't need to be
statement right there,
validated all the time.
that statement right there, that basically makes me an alt-right white supremacist neo-Nazi.
What?
Now, Goose knows me a little bit better, so it's hilarious that if I say something like that, I'm basically a neo-Nazi.
Right. I mean, you wouldn't paint me in that corner either, Richard. But you would obviously say that I have views that are different from yours, yet we could be in the same space with and find common ground, despite our
this rule here.
ways.
That's right. We're very different people, but this rule here, I mean, you realize that we are white supremacist, alt-right, fascist Trump supporters, actually. I mean, just
to some people, but that is ridiculous. That
of course it's ridiculous.
Right. Right.
Because you know what it is? They think that it means that you get to hurl racial expletives and you get to discriminate and torture people or something. That's not what this rule is about. Nowhere in here did I say that if I don't like you, that means I have the right to commit crimes.
Correct.
I obviously don't believe that.
I had a let's stick on this even more because we're going in a different area where you brought up high school, and it reminded me of college. The contrast between social interaction in high school versus social interaction in college. For me, my social interaction in high school was I got pegged early in my junior high career as a nerd, a a not cool kid, and so then it stuck with me all through high school, and so I was always that kind of outcast. I like to do things differently. I tried to, just like everybody else, and then ridiculous. But anyway, the point is that I felt like I couldn't escape this stigma, that it was always with me. And then when I immediately go to college, I find none of that goes with you, and all of a sudden everybody's just accepting you for who you are because they're getting to know you. And the way my professor noticed this in class, in one of my first college courses, is she said, I observed you, the way you interact with the people in the classroom, is you seem to, the very first day, talk to just about everybody, but by week 2 or 3, you limited your conversations to, say, 4 to 6 people, and then you just kind of discriminated against the other people that didn't interest you. And she said, I found that open and that openness to be able to communicate with everyone, that I'm willing to befriend everyone, and that discernment of who do I want to spend time with, very refreshing, is the way she put it.
I can add a story to that. In college, I was talking to an international student who was Greek, and he was an anti-Semite and very much against everything the state of Israel. So, I mean, you could imagine for me that this could be a difficult conversation, but it's just not a difficult conversation. We had a very long evening where we were chatting about his beliefs about the state of Israel. And you keep in mind, he's anti-Semitic, right? You would think, well, I mean, with the modern rules, the way this works is you cancel them, right?
Right.
you get them banned out of class, you get them pushed out of school, you take out their family business, blah, blah, blah. And I actually sat down and had a conversation with an anti-Semite about the state of Israel. And I think he learned some things, and I think I learned some things. These kinds of conversations, I mean, keep in mind, this is appalling, right? Like, talking to an anti-Semite, like, why would you do something like that, right? And I did it because I haven't really met an anti-Semite before. There's a lot of people that are anti-Semitic in the United States, but they hide it really well. But from Europe, you can get it a little bit more. So, it's an opportunity for me to learn about why they're like that, right? These kinds of conversations have stopped. I don't, by the way, this doesn't mean that I think if you're Jewish, you should go out of your way to go talk to people that are anti-Semitic.
No,
you're not obligated to do that.
What you're saying is, if it's like a caveat to the rule number 1. No one is obligated to like you, but it is imperative to get in conversations with somebody who disagrees with you. It is imperative to be willing to have conversations with people that disagree with you.
And actually, that is an implication. You're correct. It's very smart that you caught on to that. That is actually very controversial. That is not what is happening.
No.
The impression, what's happening in modern times, is that not only should you have no communication with someone that has potentially deplorable views, but you should completely destroy the person that has deplorable views, and that there is nothing productive or useful that can come out of these conversations, and that if you seek to have these conversations, this means that there's something wrong with you.
Right, that you're willing to give them a platform means that you're on the same side as them. It's as if you're...
Yeah, like they don't want the conversations to happen at all. These conversations I had in college, I said all kinds of crazy things. Like I didn't even believe them. I would go up to an anti-war person and be like, the war is good for the economy. It helps increase GDP. I mean, imagine like me saying that on a college campus today. I would probably be put in prison or something.
if I may say, that you in your youth were willing to take the opposite view just to have the conversation, to get into the argument. The argument.
And
The
I also
argument
like
of
seeing
itself.
Reactions.
Correct. The argument and the
Yes.
reaction yourself was entertaining enough to you to be willing to put yourself and your likitude at risk, which you see as in modern times as people unwilling or unable to do.
Not only that, I mean, it's destroy the person that engages in controversial topics. I mean, we're well beyond just ignoring them. We're talking about destroying them. And if you can, get criminal charges filed against people, take away their licenses.
Such as
I like talking about controversial.
What was that?
I've always liked talking about controversial things, but this also comes with the consequence. People don't like me. Which, when I was younger, I mean, you got a very tame, mellow Richard that you engage with. It was much more reasonable. I was very pig-headed and opinionated when I was younger, and people didn't like me, and that was okay. I mean, one of the weird things is when I was younger, I accepted that this is kind of a consequence of my behavior, is if you engage in these controversial topics, and you're very around you. And you know what? That is perfectly okay.
I believe that you and we're a very similar cloth in that sense. That I have what I would call tact been added, and wisdom, just because you think something doesn't mean you have to say it, and that takes a certain level of discernment. Not that you're afraid to share what you're thinking, but is it going to benefit? Is what I'm going to say going to benefit the conversation?
Yeah. Now I am afraid to share things.
Well, yes, I'm certain.
Now,
I'm certain, like, none
now,
of this, would I ever have this kind of conversation with somebody that I work with? Oh, gosh, no. Because I wouldn't want to go into my higher ups.
I have children too, right? So I have to think about things I say because I have children.
Okay, so what,
I mean, there's
like
things
in
happening.
terms of... I'm
Like
curious.
If you say the wrong things to the in-laws, there's been children taken from parents because they didn't get their kids vaccinated.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this has really happened. And criminal charges have been filed against people who have said, like, obnoxious racial stuff. That's happened. Not in the United States, but it's happened. Prison sentences have been given out for saying something, highly inappropriate. Now we're at the point where it's like, oh, I definitely don't even want to put my toe in the water on saying something controversial.
And when you get arrested for homeschooling your kids in Germany, scary stuff.
I haven't even heard about that. But I mean, it's wild to me. I'm also being told that I should hate people that homeschool their kids for some reason.
Who's saying that?
It's so weird.
Where do you hear that?
It's online. It's all fake, but it's all the stuff that you read online. That's where we get the vast majority of our information. This is where all these strong opinions and the mass transformation of society is happening.
I guess I haven't heard the anti, because so no matter who I've dealt with, and I've dealt with all kinds of various people, in terms of their political persuasion or their willingness to embrace insanity, but I always get them to agree on this one principal point, that there is no greater teacher of a child than their parent. And that is regardless of if you're the most attentive parent or you're abandoned. You abandon your child. You're still teaching them volumes in your abandonment. You're unwilling to engage with them. So I just choose to take a more active role in my parenting, in my teaching role. And when I express it that way, they go, yeah, there is no greater teacher for a child than the parent.
And I would like to add to that rule, I actually think the best teacher is failure. This is another concept. I didn't even put this rule of life because this wasn't about parenting. But I think that one of the best things about modern life is that the room for failure is bigger than ever. And the opportunities for failure are bigger than ever. And I think parents are not exploiting it enough.
Well, they come to pick up the
It's never
pieces
been
way too
safer.
quickly.
It's never been safer to let your children fail.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
I don't understand.
allow
It's
it.
one of the fastest.
They go to pick up the pieces.
It's one of the. That's right. That's right. So the fastest way children learn is when they fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand what has happened with parenting. You know, I think one of the negative things is a kid fails and the parents come down and act like their kid is garbage. Yeah, you come down too hard, and I don't think that's right. You're supposed to teach them how to do better.
I think the exact opposite
take them
happens.
up.
The child can do no wrong, so when they do wrong, it's the other person's fault, and they will try to circumvent their child's culpability by implicating somebody else.
And you see this play out with autism. Asperger's, who discovered Asperger's, he's 60 years ahead of his time. He knew that the way to fix how to help them was to give them a special interest to focus on and build their social life around it. And all of a sudden, all these problems with Asperger's not fitting in and not being able to function in society disappeared. He had clinical trials that he ran. It's just that Asperger was in Austria in the 1930s when he ran these studies, and then the Germans took over, and his work didn't get published because people thought he was a Nazi. He might have been, it's not clear, but for 60 years, we basically lost a lot of progress on dealing with autism because we can't publish this work from somebody that could be a Nazi. So instead, we're going to, stick electric cattle rods up their butt and torture them, which is what ABA therapy was based on in the 1960s. But we won't talk about that.
Yikes!
But my point is, I mean, you don't want to hear about the history of how ABA therapy started. And this person that invented it is praised, as a major contributor to improving autistic life.
All right. Well, let's keep things out of our buttholes and move on to rule number 2.
Yeah.
No one is obligated to care about your identity or pet causes. Explain.
I think we live in a time where we are all identifying. Now, from the right, what they think about are you gay or are you not gay? What's your gender identity?
That's what the right thinks
the left. About what the left's identity focus is, right? And then from the left, the identity is like, I believe it was a war of northern aggression and religious identity and like hillbilly, like culture and identity, right? Like that's what they kind of associate. That's just something that people on the right are proud to identify as, right? So identity is everywhere. We all identify something somewhere along the way. But the point of Rule 2 is that it doesn't matter. Nobody else is obligated to care about it. It's a very controversial thing to say. And in modern times, I think where this pops up over and over again is like, oh, I'm transgender. So somehow this is supposed to impact every single aspect of their social interactions.
Well, I'd say the problem lies in the idea that most, I would say a majority of people for the longest time did not want to be identified as in a category. They were okay with being just a whatever, an American, a person, a male, a female. You're just a person. You're a person. You don't want to be classified. You don't want to be labeled. Okay? But what has changed
kind of true.
What has changed in the modern times is that there's a pride that comes with the label, that I get to carry this
Mm-hmm.
mantle, this superiority, because I have all these identities that I can put upon myself, which I see are as unnecessary.
Yeah, I'm pretty libertarian about this stuff. I know you don't pay attention to this, but I watch this TikTok stuff, and like, Faye is a gender identity, and there are way more gender identities than you really care. Okay. I mean, it's kind of funny in a way, but what happens is they're like, if you don't use the proper gender pronoun when engaging with me, this is your problem. And this is what I'm about to say is like, your channel is going to get canceled.
No.
Okay. I'm going to say that it is not my obligation to correctly memorize one of tens of thousands of gender identity pronouns to make you happy. What I usually do in these situations is I just identify them by their name, which in my opinion is a more respectful way to talk to someone.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually better to communicate with someone by referring to them to their name. But if we get off of that, there's pet causes too, which is something that is really, really taking over. It's either you're vegan or you're against leather products.
Again, yeah,
or
right. It's these labels that you put on yourself to put I'm better than you. I'm better than you because I don't eat meat. I'm better than you because I don't I only eat plant-based diet. I'm better than you because I only shop at local whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't care. It doesn't the label that you put on yourself doesn't make you a better person or a worse person than someone else. What makes you a better person or a worse person?
So this is going to tie into a problem. This is going to tie into a problem. You remember how people have personalities? Like, you can see it when you have a baby. Like, the personality starts forming, and then their actions start happening as they get older, and a certain personality gets associated with a person, right? Something has happened where what you identify as is defining your personality. And it's wild. I mean, I think we're witnessing this transformation in real time. I think it's hitting I think it's definitely strong in the millennial generation, but it's wildly out of control with like Generation Z. Something has happened where doing things isn't defining your personality anymore.
It's
what
the
pet
complete
causes do
opposite
you...
of it's the complete opposite of Martin Luther King Jr.'s whole "I have a dream" speech. Instead of being judged by the content of your character, you're only being judged by the labels that you put up that you identify as, and that's ridiculous.
I don't understand it. I don't understand what's happened, and I'm witnessing this in real time, and I'm seeing the transformation. I'm sounding like an old fart. I remember a time when you were judged by what you did, not as what
Right.
you. I feel like I'm like 65 years old, talking about what life used to be like, which wasn't that long ago. And I don't think this is an accident. I think this is also something that is artificially constructed. But this is my rule too, and this is, I mean, you're gonna get canceled, Goose.
No.
Like, I don't even know if you can publish this video with Rule 2. I mean, that's basically labeling yourself a white supremacist.
No, I think I have a better chance of getting disbanded for playing Pac, the Pac mod with some of the labels of those units. But
you can't publish a video with a rule like that. That's not how it works anymore.
Well, I'm sure it'll get flagged or whatever. But the important point is that I don't know. The rule number 2 is flawed in and of itself because it adds like gravitas, for failure to find a better word, to identity politics, to pet causes, by even giving them no one is obligated to care about your identity or pet causes. Be judged. It would be better is be judged by your character rather than your identity.
This is a poorly written rule, and there's better ways to write it. I agree, but this is rules for modern life. So Martin Luther King is not relevant here.
This is why we're having the dialogue. And I'm probably gonna have to get going here pretty soon because my wife is gonna be done with that feeding that baby soon. But I did want to get the
point is that you're working in a Martin Luther King time. That timeline's over. Martin Luther King is completely irrelevant for modern life. You can't bring him in. So instead, we'll do the negation instead of the one you wanted to do. So we can talk about Rule 3 real quick. So this is really important. So all information consumed is biased, blah, blah, blah. One of the things I think will shock people.
Read it out.
Okay. All information consumed is biased, flawed, built upon flawed sources, and likely not even real. Check who created the information, who financed it, whether conflicts of interest exist, and if possible, physically confirm the information. There's a lot to unpack here. I think a lot of people would be shocked to learn that the vast majority of information on the internet is not real.
I
really want that to sink in. So the vast majority of content produced on the internet right now is by bots. And possibly has been true for 7 or 8 years now.
Well, I know that articles are written in such a way that the headlines are different than the content of the actual article. So if you read the actual article, they very often will tell the exact opposite of what the bullet point that got you to click on it. For example, like say they found the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, something like that. And you click on that link and then you read through the information and you go, no, it's saying the exact opposite. It says they have not found the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You see what I'm saying? Or for example, study shows that transgender kids who have parents that are transgender have a healthier upbringing than those that from heterosexual marriage. And then you click on the link and you're like, no, it's actually telling you the exact opposite. Why?
Yeah. So I have a data background, so I can, without going into too much detail, a lot of studies are really bad. And there's lots of things that you can do to do p-hacking and exclude certain observations from your data set. Normally, you do that, you have to record why you're excluding outliers, and you have to have a good reason. You normally can't just exclude outliers. Okay, long story short is there's a lot of papers published in all the fields, like all of the fields, not just social media and social sciences, that we can't reproduce. And it's because the way that they constructed their model or the way that they did the experiment was not accurately described, or possibly they fudged the numbers. So this goes for everything. I mean, you pick transgender topics, but you could pick, how do kids grow up in divorced households or with a religious figurehead or whatever. There's a lot of stuff that people believe is true that if we actually try to go to the source material, you would find issues. You might not even be able to find confirmation of the data. I mean, there's stuff out there. I don't even think we can say this. Are we allowed to talk about the Russian stuff? Or is that YouTube will just crush you if you even mention it?
Dude, I don't know. I don't pay attention to any of it.
But anyway, the blah, 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 the orange man, this Russian stuff, which I also believed in. But, it kind of turns out that the media was promoting this report about the orange man in Russia. And it was based off of a report that really isn't real.
Right.
The conflict of interest was in the report. And then it got permeated in blown out into the interwebs, and people like me believed these reports. Okay, that's just another example. There's it's endless. So people don't realize that you can't even do trust but verify, because even if I verify that a paper was published and peer reviewed, unless I see the data wrangling process, there are ways that you can run your models so that a certain result appears, right? Like you have to have access to the original data source, and normally a good paper would explain any excluded observations or how they restricted it. But I think more and more we're just seeing really lazy production of data results. I know we can't say this, but for the big C, there's data relating to the big C, and it's really badly presented. And frankly, there's a lot of false reports about the data relating to the big C. So we have a lot of false understandings relating to the big C, but you're not allowed to say anything about it, because then YouTube is gonna bring the ban hammer down, or whatever. All social media will.
Yeah, well, I don't really give a crap what the heck they want to do with my channel. It's all part of the fun and games of having dialogue, and I'm sure that a little guy like me can have a dialogue with a little guy like you, and we can be just fine. But I'm gonna have to let you go here because I got my little baby again. My wife's done feeding, and I gotta give my mom a call because something's going on with my dad. So
Okay, no problem.
We'll continue this another time, and I'd like to start back up again on Rule 3 because there's a lot that we could unpack with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
And as always, stay Lutheran, my friends. Thanks for watching.